I wake up every morning to silence now. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that swallows you whole, the kind that reminds you someone's missing. For 12 years, I've been a widow. 12 years since I last heard Robert say my name out loud, since I felt his hand squeeze mine before sleep, since I heard his footsteps in our hallway. But I had his voice. I had 43 recordings. Voice messages he left me over the years. Clara, don't forget your umbrella, love. Clara, I'm running late, but I'm thinking about you. Clara, you make even Mondays beautiful. Simple words. Nothing dramatic, just him, his rhythm, his breath, his presence captured in digital amber. I'm 67 now, and I've learned that grief doesn't end. It just changes shape. Some days it's a dull ache. Other days it's sharp enough to steal your breath. But those recordings were my lifeline. When the house felt too empty, when my bed felt too big, when I couldn't remember exactly how his laughter sounded, I would press play. And for those precious moments, Robert wasn't completely gone. My daughter Sophia moved back in 6 months ago. She's 34, pursuing her dream of becoming a singer. I was so happy to have her home again, to hear life in these rooms, to cook for someone besides myself. I told myself I was blessed, a daughter who still wanted her mother's company, who filled the silence with scales and melodies that floated through the walls. I gave her Robert's old study. She needed space for her equipment, she said. A quiet room to practice, to record her demos, to build her future. What kind of mother would I be to stand in the way of her dreams? I cleaned out his desk myself, packed his books with trembling hands, made room for her microphones and her ambition. Thank you, Mom, she said, kissing my cheek. This is exactly what I need. I should have seen it then. The way she didn't ask about the items I was removing, didn't offer to help, didn't seem to notice the tears I tried to hide. But I wanted so badly to be useful, to matter, to be the kind of mother who supports her child unconditionally. The first few weeks were lovely. I would make her tea while she practiced, leave little snacks outside the study door. Sometimes I'd sit in the hallway, just listening to her sing. She has a beautiful voice. Robert would have been so proud. I imagined telling him about her progress, about how our little girl was chasing something bigger than herself. But slowly, things began to shift. Sophia started staying up later, her music bleeding into the early morning hours. When I gently asked if she could keep it down after midnight, she sighed like I'd asked her to cut off her arm. Mom, creativity doesn't work on a schedule. If you can't understand that, maybe you should wear earplugs. Earplugs, in my own home, to block out my own daughter. I started noticing other changes. She'd walk past me in the kitchen without speaking, her phone pressed to her ear, discussing contracts and opportunities with people I'd never met. When I'd ask about her day, she'd wave me off. Can't talk now, Mom. I'm in the zone. The zone. I wasn't allowed in the zone. Last Tuesday, I made her favorite dinner, chicken piccata, the recipe my mother taught me, the one Sophia used to beg for as a child. I set the table with the good china, lit a candle, even bought a bottle of wine. I thought maybe we could talk. Really talk. The way we used to when she was younger and still told me things. She came down at 8:30, already dressed to go out. I'm meeting some producers, she said, grabbing her keys. Don't wait up. But Sophia, Mom, I don't have time for this. This is important. My career is important. She was gone before I could finish my sentence. I sat alone at that table, watching the candle burn down, watching the food grow cold. I ate by myself, each bite tasting like rejection, each swallow fighting past the lump in my throat. I told myself she was just stressed. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We make excuses. We tell ourselves it's just a phase, just the pressure of pursuing dreams, just the natural evolution of a child becoming independent. But deep down, I knew. I was becoming invisible in my own home, the woman who gave birth to her, who raised her, who gave up Robert's sacred space for her. I was becoming nothing more than background noise. Still, I had my recordings. Late at night, when Sophia's music finally stopped and the house fell silent again, I would lie in bed with my headphones on, listening to Robert remind me that I was loved, that I mattered, that my existence had purpose beyond being useful to others. Clara, his voice would whisper through the years, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. and I would fall asleep believing just for a moment that someone still saw me. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to our channel. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and it really helps us continue bringing you these emotional journeys. And comment below with which city you're watching from. Your support means the world. I didn't know then that my sanctuary was about to be destroyed, that the one thing keeping me tethered to hope, to memory, to the feeling of being loved, that Sophia would take that too. I didn't know that the silence I feared was nothing compared to the erasure that was coming. The morning I found the study door locked, something cold settled in my chest. I'd brought Sophia her coffee, 2 sugars, a splash of cream, just the way she likes it. The same way I've made it since she was 16 and started drinking coffee to feel grown up. My hand was raised to knock when I heard her voice inside, sharp and annoyed. No, Mom doesn't understand. She's from a different generation. She thinks success means stability and safety, not taking risks. I froze, the coffee mug warm against my palm. Exactly, Sophia continued, her voice carrying that edge of dismissiveness I'd been hearing more and more. She spent her whole life playing it safe, and what did it get her? A husband who died too young and a house that's falling apart. I'm not making those mistakes. The words hit me like stones, each one carefully aimed, perfectly weighted to cause maximum damage. My whole life, reduced to mistakes and mediocrity by the daughter I'd sacrificed everything to raise. I set the coffee down outside her door and walked away on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. I didn't cry. Not then. The hurt was too deep for tears, buried somewhere beneath my ribs where it could fester in private. That afternoon, Sophia's friend Maya came over. I'd known Maya since the girls were in high school. A sweet kid who used to call me Mama Clara and eat 3 helpings of my lasagna. She didn't call me that anymore. They sat in the living room, Sophia's laptop open between them, reviewing some music video she was planning. I was in the kitchen, pretending to organize the pantry, but I could hear every word. Your mom's been really generous, letting you use the house like this, Maya said. Sophia laughed. Actually laughed. Generous? Maya, she has nothing else to do. It's not like she has a life or anything. At least I'm giving her a purpose, supporting her daughter's dreams. Still, that study was your dad's, was being the key word. He's gone. Mom needs to stop living in the past and let me build a future. I gripped the shelf so hard my knuckles went white. The cans of soup blurred in front of me. Robert's study wasn't just a room. It was the place where he'd written me love notes on Sunday mornings, where he'd practiced his presentations, pacing back and forth while I listened from the doorway, where I'd found him the night he died, slumped over his desk, a half-written grocery list beside him. Don't forget, Clara loves the strawberries from the farmer's market. That room held his ghost, and I'd handed it over like it meant nothing, because Sophia needed it, because mother's sacrifice, because I was stupid enough to believe that love was a currency that would eventually be repaid. The next week, Sophia started bringing people home for her creative sessions. Producers, musicians, hangers-on who looked at my furniture like they were calculating its resale value. They'd sprawl across my couch, Robert's couch, the one we'd picked out together 32 years ago, with their shoes on, leaving marks I'd scrub out later when they were gone. I'd offer them refreshments, playing the gracious host, hoping Sophia would see me trying, would appreciate the effort. But she'd barely glance my way. Mom, we're working. We don't need anything. Dismissed. Always dismissed. One evening, a man named Derek, slicked back hair, expensive watch, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, picked up the framed photo of Robert and me from our 25th anniversary. This your dad? He asked Sophia. Yeah, he passed. Sorry to hear that. He set the frame down carelessly, slightly off-center. So the house is yours now? I was standing right there in my own living room, and he was talking about me like I was already dead. It's my mom's, Sophia said, but there was something in her tone, something calculating. For now. Those 2 words echoed in my head for days. What did she mean, for now? This was my house. Robert and I had bought it together, had painted every wall, had planted the garden, had made love in every room. This was my home. But suddenly, I wasn't sure anymore. Suddenly, I felt like a guest in my own life, waiting for someone to tell me when my time was up. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. I'd spent the day cleaning, really cleaning, the way I used to when Robert was alive and we'd host dinner parties. I'd scrubbed the floors, dusted every surface, even polished the silverware we never used anymore. I wanted the house to feel like a home again, not a recording studio with a woman who used to matter haunting the corners. Sophia came home late, slamming the door with a force that rattled the windows. "Bad day?" I asked gently, looking up from my book. She threw her bag on the floor. "The worst. That idiot producer wants me to change my entire sound. Says I'm not commercial enough. Can you believe that? I'm sorry, sweetheart. But maybe what? Maybe he's right? Maybe I should just give up and become like you?" The venom in her voice made me flinch. "I didn't mean—" "You never mean anything, Mom. That's the problem. You just exist. You just take up space. Do you know what it's like? Trying to build something? Trying to become someone while living with a person who's already given up on life?" Each word was a blade. Clean, precise, designed to cut deep. "I haven't given up," I whispered. I'm just grieving. For 12 years? 12 years, Mom. At some point, grief becomes an excuse. At some point, you have to decide whether you're going to live or just haunt your own life. I stood up, my legs shaking. "This is my home, Sophia." "Is it?" "Because it feels like a mausoleum. Everything here is about Dad, his chair, his books, his memory. What about me? What about my life, my future? I gave you his study. You gave me a room. One room in a house full of ghosts. Do you know what it's like trying to create something new while you're drowning in the past?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that she had no idea what it was like to lose the person who made you feel real, who made you feel seen, who made you feel like your existence mattered beyond what you could provide for others. But I didn't. Because mothers don't scream. We swallow. We absorb. We take the blows and we smile. And we pretend it doesn't hurt because we're supposed to be strong enough to handle anything our children throw at us. "I'm sorry," I said instead. "I'm sorry my grief is inconvenient for you." Sophia's face twisted with something between anger and disgust. "You know what? I'm going out. Don't wait up." She grabbed her bag and left, leaving me standing in the living room of the home I no longer recognized, wondering when exactly I'd become the villain in my daughter's story. That night, I couldn't bring myself to listen to Robert's recordings. For the first time in 12 years, the thought of his voice brought more pain than comfort. Because what would he think, seeing me like this? Seeing our daughter treat me like an obstacle instead of a person? Would he be disappointed in me for being too weak? Or would he be heartbroken, knowing that the child we'd raised together had become someone who could look her own mother in the eye and tell her she was nothing more than a ghost taking up space? I lay in our bed, my bed now, I suppose, and stared at the ceiling, listening to the silence I'd once feared. Now it felt like mercy. At least silence didn't judge. At least silence didn't tell me I was worthless. At least silence didn't make me feel like loving my child was the biggest mistake I'd ever made. I started making myself smaller after that night. It wasn't a conscious decision. It just happened. The way water finds the cracks in concrete. I'd walk softer through my own hallways. I'd cook at times when Sophia wasn't home, leaving covered plates in the refrigerator with little notes she never acknowledged. I'd do my laundry in the early morning hours so the machine wouldn't disturb her creative process. I was erasing myself, one small accommodation at a time. But no matter how invisible I made myself, it was never enough. 2 weeks after our confrontation, Sophia announced she was throwing a party. Networking, she called it. Industry people who need to see me in my element. My element, she said. My home had become her element. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, because what else could I say? "What can I do to help?" She looked at me like I'd offered to perform surgery. "Just stay out of the way, okay? Maybe go to a movie or something. This is important, and I need people to take me seriously." The implication hung in the air. I made her look less serious. My existence diminished her credibility. The night of the party, I retreated to my bedroom at 7 o'clock, like a child sent to bed early. Through my door, I could hear the music thumping, voices rising and falling, laughter that sounded expensive and hollow. My house was full of strangers, and I was hiding in my own bedroom like an intruder. Around 9, I needed water. My throat was dry, and I'd finished the glass on my nightstand hours ago. I opened my door carefully, listening. The party sounded like it was mostly in the living room and kitchen. I could slip downstairs, fill my glass, and retreat without anyone noticing. I made it to the kitchen and was filling my glass when I heard Sophia's voice in the hallway, talking to someone. Yeah, I'm living with my mom right now. Temporarily, obviously. Just until my career takes off. That's sweet. Taking care of your elderly mother, a woman's voice responded. I'm 67, I wanted to shout. Not elderly. Not yet. Sophia laughed. That new laugh she'd developed, brittle and performative. Taking care of? Please, it's more like babysitting. She's completely lost without my dad. Honestly, I think she'd forget to eat if I wasn't here. My hand trembled, water spilling over the rim of the glass. That's sad, the woman said. It is. She had her whole identity wrapped up in being a wife. Now she doesn't know who she is. It's actually kind of pathetic. Pathetic. My own daughter called me pathetic to a stranger in my own home. I set the glass down before I could drop it, but the sound made Sophia pause. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face flickering with something. Annoyance, maybe embarrassment, but not shame. Never shame. Mom, what are you doing down here? Getting water. My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. In my kitchen. Her friend appeared behind her, a tall woman with perfect makeup and calculating eyes. She looked at me the way you'd look at a stray cat that wandered into a restaurant, with pity mixed with disgust. This is my mom, Sophia said flatly. Mom, this is Jessica. She's a talent scout. Nice to meet you, I managed. Jessica's smile was professional and empty. Likewise. You have a lovely home. Thank you. My husband and I. Mom, we're kind of in the middle of something, Sophia interrupted. Could you? She made a vague gesture toward the stairs, a dismissal. In my own kitchen, my own daughter was dismissing me like a server who'd lingered too long at a table. I picked up my water glass, my cheeks burning. Of course. I'm sorry. I climbed the stairs with as much dignity as I could gather, which wasn't much. Behind me, I heard Jessica say, She seems sweet, and Sophia's response, She's exhausting. I closed my bedroom door and sat on the edge of my bed, the water glass clutched in both hands. Exhausting. Pathetic. A ghost taking up space. Was that really what I'd become? Or was that what I'd always been and I'd just been too blind to see it? The party went until 3 in the morning. I lay awake, listening to my home being occupied by people who didn't care about it, didn't know about the memories soaked into the walls, didn't understand that every scuff mark and dent had a story. When silence finally came, it felt like aftermath, like something had been destroyed and I was surveying the damage. The next morning, I found cigarette burns on Robert's coffee table, wine stains on the carpet he'd installed himself, cursing cheerfully as he measured and cut and laid each piece with meticulous care. Someone had broken the picture frame from our wedding day. The photo was intact, but the glass was shattered, our smiling faces fractured into pieces. I knelt on the floor, carefully picking up the shards, and that's when Sophia found me. Oh, that, she said, yawning. Yeah, someone knocked it over. Accidents happen. This was from our wedding day. I know, Mom. I'll get you a new frame. I don't want a new frame. I want people to respect my home. Sophia's expression hardened. Your home? Let's be real here. Dad paid for this house. You were a part-time bookkeeper who could barely contribute to the mortgage. This house exists because of him, not you. The words landed like a slap. It was true that Robert had earned more. He'd been an engineer, and I'd worked part-time so I could be home when Sophia got out of school, could drive her to dance classes and play dates, could be the mother I thought she needed. But I'd contributed. In money, yes, but also in all the invisible labor that kept a household running, that turned a house into a home. The meals cooked and the clothes washed and the homework helped and the fevers nursed and the tears dried and the dreams encouraged. All of it, apparently, worthless. I raised you, I whispered, and I'm grateful. But gratitude doesn't mean I have to live in a time capsule. It doesn't mean I have to tiptoe around your feelings forever. At some point, Mom, you have to let me live my life. I'm not stopping you. Yes, you are. Every time you look at me with those sad eyes, every time you mention Dad, Every time you make me feel guilty for wanting more than this." She gestured around the room. "You're stopping me. You're pulling me down with your grief." I stood up, still holding pieces of broken glass. "I'm sorry my love for your father is such a burden to you. That's not fair, isn't it? You just told me I'm pathetic for missing my husband. You called me exhausting for existing in my own home. What exactly am I allowed to feel, Sophia? What emotion is convenient enough for you?" Her face flushed. "I never said you were pathetic. Last night, in the hallway, you told Jessica I was pathetic." For a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Shame, maybe. Regret. But it disappeared as quickly as it came, replaced by defensive anger. "You were eavesdropping? I was getting water." "Well, maybe if you heard that, you needed to hear it. Maybe you need to understand how you come across to people. This whole tragic widow routine. It's too much, Mom. It's been 12 years. At some point, you need to move on. Move on. As if love had an expiration date. As if grief followed a schedule convenient for everyone else. Get out," I said quietly. Sophia blinked. "What?" "Get out of this room. I need to clean up the mess your party made." "Mom?" "Please, Sophia, just go." She hesitated, and for a second, I thought she might apologize, might recognize the hurt she was causing, might remember that I was her mother, not just an obstacle to her success. But she didn't. She turned and walked away, leaving me kneeling on the floor with broken glass in my hands and broken promises in my heart. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went to visit Robert's grave. The cemetery was quiet, dotted with flowers in various states of decay. I'd brought fresh roses, his favorite. I sat beside his headstone, tracing his name with my finger. "I don't know what to do," I told him. "She's become someone I don't recognize. Or maybe she's always been this person, and I just didn't want to see it." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying away my words. "She thinks I'm pathetic. She thinks our love is something I should just get over, like you were a phase, like we were a phase." I laid the roses against the stone. "I wish you were here. You'd know what to say. You always knew how to make things better." But Robert wasn't there. He was gone, and I was alone. And our daughter had decided that my grief was an inconvenience she no longer wanted to accommodate. When I got home, the study door was open. Sophia was inside, and I could hear her on the phone. "No, I'm telling you, the acoustics in here are perfect. Yeah, I had to fight for it. Mom wanted to keep it as some kind of shrine, but I convinced her. No, she's fine. She barely uses it anyway." I stood in the hallway, listening to her rewrite our history, listening to her paint me as the selfish one, the unreasonable one, the one who had to be managed and convinced. And something inside me, something that had been bending and bending under the weight of her disrespect, finally cracked. Not broke, not shattered, just cracked enough to let a little bit of anger seep through. Just enough to make me wonder, how much of myself am I supposed to sacrifice before it's enough? How small am I supposed to make myself before I'm finally acceptable? How much does a mother have to disappear before her daughter is satisfied? The following weeks blurred into a routine of avoidance and silence. Sophia and I moved around each other like dancers who'd forgotten the steps, occupying the same space, but never truly connecting. I stopped trying to have conversations. I stopped making her favorite meals. I stopped hoping she'd notice me long enough to see the damage she was doing. I just existed. Quietly, carefully, like a tenant in my own life. One morning, I woke up and couldn't remember what day it was. Tuesday? Thursday? Did it matter? Every day looked the same. Wake up, avoid Sophia, pretend to have purpose, go to bed, repeat. I'd stopped going to my book club. The women there would ask how Sophia was doing, their faces bright with the assumption that having your adult child move home was a blessing. How could I explain that blessing felt more like punishment? That every day in my daughter's presence made me feel smaller, less significant, more expendable? I'd stopped calling my friend Margaret. She'd want to meet for coffee, want to hear about my life. And what would I tell her? That I'd become a ghost? That my daughter looked through me like I was made of glass? I'd even stopped tending Robert's garden. The roses he'd planted were blooming without me, and somehow that felt appropriate. Life continuing, beauty persisting. everything moving forward while I remained stuck. The only thing I still did, religiously, was listen to Robert's voice messages. They were my anchor, my proof that I'd once mattered to someone, that my existence had once brought joy instead of inconvenience. But even that was starting to hurt in new ways. Clara, you make everything better just by being in the room. Did I, Robert? Because our daughter seems to think I make everything worse. I don't know what I'd do without you, love. You'd probably be fine. Everyone seems fine without me. I was sitting at the kitchen table one afternoon staring at nothing when Sophia came down. She was on her phone, as always, but she paused when she saw me. Mom, you okay? I look what? I asked, too tired to care about the answer. I don't know. Different. Different. What a careful word. Not sad, not broken, not devastated. Different. As if my pain was just an aesthetic choice I'd made. I'm fine, I lied. She studied me for a moment, and I thought maybe she'd see me, see what she'd been doing, how she'd been eroding me piece by piece. Good, she said finally, because I need to talk to you about something. My stomach dropped. There was something in her tone, something practiced and rehearsed. I've been offered an opportunity, she continued, setting her phone down on the table like she was about to conduct a business meeting. A producer in Nashville wants to work with me. It's a 6-month contract, with the possibility of extension. That's wonderful, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I wanted her to succeed. I wanted her to be happy, even if her happiness seemed to require my absence. There's just one thing. She paused, and I saw her gathering courage. Not the courage to face something difficult, but the courage to ask for something she knew she shouldn't. The pay isn't great at first. It's more of an investment in my future, so I'd need to sublet the study, maybe the whole upstairs to make ends meet. The words didn't land at first. They just hung there, waiting for my brain to process them. Sublet? You want to rent out part of my house? Our house, technically. It's still in Dad's name, and I'm his heir. So, legally? Legally? The word came out sharp. You're talking to me about legality? I'm your mother, and I'm asking you to help me. This is my dream, Mom. My one shot. I need you to support me. Support. That word again. The word that had been used to justify every boundary crossed, every feeling dismissed, every piece of myself I'd surrendered. What about my recordings? I asked quietly. Your what? Robert's voice messages. They're stored on the old computer in the study, the one I let you use. Sophia waved her hand dismissively. Those old things? Mom, you have them backed up somewhere, right? No, that's the only copy. Well, that's not very smart. But don't worry, whoever sublets will be careful. No. The word surprised both of us. What? Sophia's face hardened. No, you're not subletting the study. You're not bringing strangers into this house, and you're not touching that computer. Mom, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. My voice rose, cracking under the weight of months of swallowed anger. You've taken everything. You've taken your father's space, my peace, my dignity. You've called me pathetic and exhausting and told strangers I'm a burden. And I've accepted it. I've made myself smaller and quieter and more invisible because I thought that's what love meant. That's what mothers do. Mom? But you're not taking those recordings. They're all I have left of him. They're all I have left of feeling loved. Sophia's expression shifted to something cold and calculated. You're being selfish. This is my future we're talking about, and you're worried about some old voice messages. They're not old. They're him. They're proof that I mattered to someone, that my life had meaning beyond being useful. That's exactly your problem, Sophia shouted back. You defined yourself entirely by Dad. You never developed your own identity. You never had dreams of your own. And now you're trying to hold me back because you're jealous that I actually have ambition. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Jealous? You think I'm jealous? What else would you call it? You can't stand that I'm building something, that I'm becoming someone, while you're just stuck, frozen in time with your dead husband's voice in your ears. Dead husband. She said it like an insult, like loving someone who'd passed was a character flaw. Get out, I whispered. This is my house too. Get out! The scream tore from my throat, raw and primal. Get out of my sight! Sophia grabbed her phone and stormed upstairs. Minutes later, she came down with a bag, her face set in righteous anger. Fine, I'll stay at Derek's place. But this conversation isn't over, Mom. You need to decide what's more important, dead memories or your living daughter's future. The door slammed behind her, and the silence that followed was different from any silence I'd known before. This wasn't peaceful. This wasn't even sad. This was the silence of complete emptiness, of a space that had been vacated and might never be filled again. I walked to the study on shaking legs. The computer sat on the desk, ancient by modern standards, but precious beyond measure. I turned it on, listening to the familiar whir of the hard drive, and navigated to the folder where I'd saved every voice message Robert had ever left me. My hand hovered over the mouse. I should back them up. Sophia was right about that, at least. I should protect these files, save them somewhere safe where they couldn't be accidentally deleted or destroyed. But I was so tired, so impossibly tired. I closed the laptop and sat in Robert's chair, Sophia's chair now, I suppose, and looked around the room. His books were gone, replaced by her equipment. His desk organizer had been tossed, replaced by her cables and microphones. Even the smell had changed. His cologne had faded, replaced by her perfume and the electronic scent of machinery. Everything changed. Everything ended. Everything I loved eventually disappeared or transformed into something unrecognizable. That night, I lay in bed, and for the first time in 12 years, I didn't listen to Robert's voice. I couldn't bear to hear him tell me I mattered, that I was loved, that my presence made the world better, because if that had ever been true, it wasn't anymore. The next morning, I found Sophia's note on the kitchen counter. Mom, coming by tomorrow to get some things. We need to talk about the house situation. It's not fair that you're living in a space this big while I'm struggling. Dad would want you to help me. Think about it. Say, Dad would want you to help me. She was using him now, using his memory, his love, as a weapon against me. I read the note 3 times, and with each reading, something inside me grew colder, not harder. I wasn't becoming cruel, just colder, more distant, like I was watching my own life from somewhere far away, somewhere these words couldn't quite reach me. I folded the note carefully and threw it away. Then I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten alone so many times, where I'd watched meals grow cold waiting for a daughter who never came, and I stared at my hands. 67 years old, liver spots beginning to show, veins visible beneath thin skin, the hands that had held my baby girl, that had braided her hair, that had applauded at every recital and dried every tear, hands that had built a life that apparently meant nothing. The house was quiet, so quiet I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, counting down moments of a life I no longer recognized. And I realized something that made my chest tighten. I'd stopped fighting because I'd stopped believing I deserved to win. But I still had something Sophia didn't know about. One recording, one tape, one message that had never been digitized, never been uploaded to that computer, never been part of the collection Sophia knew existed. It was hidden, safe, forgotten by everyone but me. And in it, Robert had said something I'd never shared with anyone. Something I'd kept private, sacred, just between us. I stood up, my legs steadier than they'd been in weeks, and walked to my bedroom. In the back of my closet, behind boxes of old sweaters and shoes I'd never wear again, was a small wooden box. Robert had made it for me in his workshop, carved my initials into the lid. Inside was a cassette tape, old-fashioned, analog, irreplaceable. I held it in my palm, feeling its weight. Tomorrow Sophia was coming back. Tomorrow she'd demand more pieces of me, more concessions, more surrender. But tonight, I had this. Tonight, I had Robert's voice telling me something that would change everything. Tonight, I remembered that I wasn't just a ghost taking up space. I was Clara Morrison, and I still had one move left to make. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in bed with the cassette tape in my hands, turning it over and over, feeling the physical weight of something that held more than just sound. Robert had recorded this message 3 days before he died. I'd been at my sister's house, helping her recover from surgery, and he'd left it on our answering machine. The old one we'd kept even after getting cell phones because he loved the ritual of coming home to messages. Said it made the house feel alive. I'd never transferred it to digital. Never played it for anyone. It felt too private, too raw, too much like the final gift from a man who hadn't known he was saying goodbye. In the pale light of dawn, I finally got up and found my old cassette player in a box in the basement. The batteries were dead, but I had some in the kitchen drawer. My hands shook as I loaded them, pressed the tape into place. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, back against the bed, and pressed play. Static first. Then his voice, warm and alive and so achingly real that my breath caught. "Clara, my love, I know you're worried about your sister, but she's tough. She'll be fine. You know who taught her to be strong? You did. You've always been the strong one, even when you don't see it yourself." I closed my eyes, tears already streaming down my face. "I was thinking today about something you said last week, about feeling like you've sacrificed too much, like you gave up your own dreams to support mine and Sophia's. And I need you to know something, sweetheart. You didn't give up your dreams. You became mine. Our family, our home, the life we built. That was never my dream alone. That was ours. We built it together, and it's beautiful because of you." His voice cracked slightly, emotion bleeding through. "You asked me once if I thought you'd wasted your potential, working part-time so you could be home for Sophia. Clara, you didn't waste anything. You invested it. In her. In us. In love. And that's the best investment anyone can make." A pause. I could hear him breathing, gathering his thoughts. "But here's what I need you to remember, especially if something ever happens to me. And don't make that face, we both know life is unpredictable. You are not just my wife or Sophia's mother. You're Clara. You're brilliant and kind and stronger than you know. And if you ever forget that, I need you to remember what I'm about to say." Another pause, longer this time. "You always find a way back to light, Clara. Even in the darkest times, you find it. It's who you are. It's your gift. And no matter what happens, no matter who tries to dim you, don't let them. Promise me. Don't let them take your light." The message ended with his soft laugh. "Okay, getting too philosophical here. Come home safe, love. The house is too quiet without you." Click. I sat there on the floor, the tape player silent in my lap, and for the first time in months I wasn't crying from pain. I was crying from recognition. Robert had seen me, really seen me. Not as an accessory to his life or a servant to our daughter's needs, but as myself, as Clara. And he'd been worried, even before he died. He'd been worried that I'd forget who I was, that I'd let people take advantage of my kindness, that I'd dim my own light to make others more comfortable. He'd been right to worry, but he'd also believed in something else. He'd believed I could find my way back. I spent that morning doing something I hadn't done in years. I looked at myself. Really looked. Not in the mirror, though I did that too, forcing myself to see the woman standing there instead of just checking if I looked presentable enough not to embarrass my daughter. I looked at my life, at what I'd become, at what I'd allowed. I pulled out my old journals, the ones I'd kept before Robert died, before grief had consumed all my words. I read about the woman I'd been, someone who volunteered at the library, who took watercolor classes, who had opinions and dreams and a sense of self that existed independent of anyone else's needs. Where had she gone? I knew the answer. She'd been erased, bit, by well-meaning sacrifices that had become a habit, then an identity, then a prison. I'd learned to find worth only in being needed, and when grief made me less useful, I'd accepted being treated as worthless. But Robert's voice, not just his words, but the certainty in them, the absolute belief that I had light to give, reminded me of something crucial. I wasn't pathetic for loving. I wasn't exhausting for grieving. I wasn't selfish for wanting basic respect in my own home. I was human, and humans deserved dignity. That afternoon, I did something that surprised even me. I called Margaret, my friend from book club. "Clara, I was just thinking about you. Are you okay? You've missed so many meetings. I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I've been lost, but I think I'm finding my way back." "Oh, sweetheart, can we meet? Coffee tomorrow? Actually, I was wondering if I could ask you something. You work at that community center, right? The one that does programs for seniors?" Yes, why? Do you know anyone there who might need help? I have experience with bookkeeping, organization, event planning. I need to do something, be something, outside of this house. There was a pause. Then Margaret's voice came back warmer, fuller. Clara Morrison, I would love to help you with that. In fact, we're looking for someone to coordinate our storytelling program, seniors sharing their life experiences. Would that interest you? Storytelling, sharing experiences, giving voice to lives that people often overlooked or dismissed. Yes, I said, and my voice sounded different even to my own ears. Stronger. Yes, that would interest me very much. Come by tomorrow. We'll talk details. And Clara, I'm proud of you. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Anticipation, not for someone else's success or someone else's happiness, but for my own life, my own purpose. That evening, I went through the house with new eyes. I saw what Sophia had changed, yes, but I also saw what remained. The curtains I'd sewn, the garden I'd planted, the paint colors I'd chosen, the memories I'd created. This was my home. Not because my name was on the deed, but because I'd poured my life into it, and I had a right to it, a right to be here, a right to be respected here. I was in the kitchen when I heard Sophia's key in the lock. She came in carrying 2 suitcases, her expression set for battle. Mom, we need to talk. Yes, I said calmly. We do. She seemed surprised by my tone. Good, because I've been thinking, and I really need you to understand. Sophia, I held up my hand. Before you say anything else, I need you to listen to me. Really listen. Can you do that? She frowned, suspicious. Okay. I took a breath, gathering the strength Robert's message had rekindled. I love you. I will always love you. You're my daughter, and nothing will change that. But loving you doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. It doesn't mean erasing myself to make room for your dreams. And it doesn't mean letting you take everything while giving nothing in return. Mom, that's not fair. No. What's not fair is you calling me pathetic. What's not fair is you treating my grief like an inconvenience. What's not fair is you demanding my home, my space, my peace, while offering nothing but contempt in return. Her face reddened. I never. You did. You have. And I let you because I was so afraid of losing you, so desperate to be needed, that I accepted scraps of affection while you took everything of value. I'm your daughter. I'm supposed to come first. You're an adult, I said quietly. And adults don't come first. Adults participate. They contribute. They respect the people who love them. Sophia's mouth opened and closed. For once, she had no response. I'm not asking you to leave, I continued. But I am establishing boundaries. The study remains as it is. You may use it, but you don't control it. You will not sublet any part of this house. You will not insult me to your friends or dismiss me in my own home. And you will treat me with the basic respect any human being deserves. And if I don't, the question hung between us, a challenge and a plea, then you'll need to find somewhere else to live. Because I'm done sacrificing my dignity for the illusion of closeness. I'm done being invisible in my own life. Sophia stared at me like she'd never seen me before. What happened to you? I thought about Robert's message, about his belief in my light. I remembered who I was, I said simply, before I became what everyone else needed me to be. She stood there for a long moment, her suitcases still in her hands, her expression cycling through shock, anger, and something that might have been the beginning of respect. I need to think, she finally said. That's fine. Take your time. But these are my terms. This is my home. And I'm done apologizing for taking up space in it. She went upstairs without another word. I stood in my kitchen, my heart pounding but my hands steady, and realized something profound. I wasn't waiting for Sophia to validate me anymore. I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to exist. Robert's voice echoed in my memory. You always find a way back to light, Clara. I wasn't all the way back yet, but I could see the light now, and I was walking toward it. It wasn't anger I felt. It wasn't revenge. It was something quieter but infinitely more powerful. It was the decision to matter. To myself, if to no one else. And that decision changed everything. The next morning, Sophia's bedroom door remained closed. I could hear her moving around occasionally, the creak of floorboards I'd memorized over decades of living in this house. But she didn't come down for breakfast, didn't emerge for coffee, stayed hidden like a child avoiding consequences. I didn't knock on her door, didn't try to smooth things over or apologize for setting boundaries. Instead, I got dressed in something other than my usual comfort clothes. A blouse I hadn't worn in 2 years, slacks that still fit, a necklace Robert had given me for our 20th anniversary. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Not because I'd changed, but because I'd forgotten what it looked like to see myself with kind eyes. Margaret met me at the community center with a hug that lasted longer than politeness required. "You look different," she said, studying my face. "Lighter somehow." "I feel different," I admitted, "like I've been holding my breath for months and finally remembered how to exhale." She smiled. "Then you're ready." The community center was a modest building, but it hummed with life. Seniors gathered in clusters, some playing cards, others working on crafts, several sitting in a circle sharing stories while a young volunteer took notes. The walls were covered with photographs, faces wrinkled with experience, eyes bright with wisdom earned through decades of living. "Our storytelling program started small," Margaret explained as we walked, "but it's grown into something special. People share their memories, their lessons, their truths. We record them, transcribe them, sometimes turn them into podcasts or articles. It gives people a voice who often feel invisible." Invisible, the word resonated. The coordinator position involves organizing the sessions, helping people feel comfortable sharing, sometimes assisting with the technical aspects of recording. But mostly, it's about listening, really listening, making people feel like their stories matter. She paused, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. The last coordinator left because she said it was too emotional. People share hard things sometimes: loss, betrayal, regret. She couldn't handle the weight of it. But I think you can. Why? Because you've carried your own weight. You understand what it means to hurt and keep going. That's rare, Clara. That's valuable. We spent the next hour discussing logistics, scheduling, equipment, coordination with the volunteers. But what struck me most was the atmosphere. People here weren't invisible. They weren't dismissed or diminished. They were seen, heard, valued. "When can I start?" I asked. Margaret's smile widened. "How about now? We have a session this afternoon. You could observe, get a feel for it." That afternoon, I sat in a circle with 8 people ranging from their 60s to their 90s, and I listened to a woman named Dorothy share about her husband's death 30 years ago. "People expected me to move on," she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "They said 3 years was enough time to grieve. But how do you measure love in years? How do you schedule grief like it's a doctor's appointment?" The group murmured in understanding. No one told her to move on. No one suggested her pain was inconvenient or excessive. "What helped?" someone asked gently. Dorothy thought for a moment, remembering that loving him wasn't the same as being stuck in the past. I could honor what we had while still building a new life. It took me a long time to understand that. Too long, maybe. She looked around the circle, her gaze landing on me. "Don't wait as long as I did to remember you're still alive, still worthy, still here." I felt those words settle into my chest like seeds waiting to grow. When I got home that evening, Sophia was in the kitchen. She'd made tea, 2 cups, an offering perhaps, or a negotiation. "Mom," she said as I entered, "can we talk?" I sat down across from her, noticing how young she looked suddenly. Not the confident performer demanding space and resources, but the daughter who'd once needed me to check for monsters under the bed. "I've been thinking about what you said." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "About respect, about boundaries. And I need you to understand. I never meant to make you feel invisible, but you did. I know. I see that now. I was so focused on my own dreams, my own needs, that I didn't see what I was taking from you." She paused, and I waited. This was her moment to choose, defensiveness or growth. "I talked to my therapist today." "You have a therapist?" She nodded. "Started seeing her a few months ago. Career pressure, family dynamics, all of it. And when I told her about our fight, about the things I said to you," her voice cracked, She asked me when I'd started seeing you as competition instead of as my mother. The word landed heavily between us. Competition? For space, for importance, for the right to matter. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. I think losing Dad scared me more than I admitted. I was 18 when he died, still figuring out who I was. And you were so consumed by grief. I felt like I lost both of you that day. My throat tightened. Sophia, let me finish. Please. She took a shaky breath. I told myself I needed to be strong, to be successful enough for both of us, to give you something to be proud of since you'd lost him. But somewhere along the way, I started resenting you for your grief, for taking up emotional space I needed, for making me feel like I had to be enough for both of us. Tears streamed down her face now. And then when I moved back and saw you still wearing his clothes, still keeping his study exactly the same, still listening to his voice, I felt like you'd chosen being his widow over being my mother, and I hated you for it. I hated you for loving him more than you loved me. The pain in her voice was real, raw, the kind of hurt that had been festering for years. Oh, sweetheart. I reached across the table, taking her hand. Loving him never meant loving you less. It was never a competition. I know that now. Or I'm trying to know it. But for so long, I felt like I came second. Like I'd always come second. And when I finally had a chance to make something of myself, to become someone worth noticing, I didn't want to share that space with anyone. Not even you. She looked at me with eyes that reminded me of the little girl who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares. I'm sorry, Mom, for calling you pathetic, for dismissing your grief, for treating our home like it was just a resource to exploit. You deserved better. You deserve better. I squeezed her hand. Thank you for saying that. Are you going to forgive me? The question was simple, but the answer was complex. Forgiveness didn't erase hurt, didn't reset relationships to how they were before, didn't obligate me to forget boundaries I'd established. I'm going to try, I said honestly, but forgiveness is a process, not a light switch. And things need to change, really change. I know. I'll find my own place, give you space. That's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking for mutual respect. I'm asking you to see me as a whole person, not just as your mother or as an obstacle to your dreams. Can you do that? She nodded. I want to try. We sat there in the kitchen, holding hands across the table, and something shifted between us. Not back to how it was before, that was impossible, but forward, toward something new, something healthier perhaps. I started a new job today, I told her, coordinating a storytelling program at the community center. Her eyes widened. Really? Mom, that's amazing. It's part-time, nothing glamorous, but it feels like mine, you know? Like I'm building something that doesn't depend on being useful to someone else. I'm proud of you, she said. And this time, the words felt genuine. Over the next few days, I settled into a routine that felt revolutionary, precisely because it was ordinary. I went to the community center 3 mornings a week. I listened to people share stories that had been waiting decades to be told. I learned names and histories and the particular way each person's face changed when they talked about the moments that had defined them. And in the evenings, I came home to a house where Sophia and I coexisted with careful courtesy. She asked about my day. I asked about her music. We ate dinner together sometimes, learning how to talk about things that mattered without weaponizing vulnerability. But I also noticed things. Small things that suggested Sophia's apology, however genuine, hadn't completely transformed her perspective. She still monopolized the study, though she asked permission now. She still had her friends over, though she introduced me properly now. She still talked about her future like it was the only future that mattered, though she caught herself sometimes and asked about mine too. And the computer with all those recordings, she still used it. Carefully, she said. Respectfully, she promised. But I'd started backing up those files, one by one, onto a flash drive I kept in Robert's wooden box, just in case. Because trust, once broken, couldn't be rebuilt with apologies alone. It required time and consistent action. One evening, as I was transferring files, I noticed something odd. Several of the recordings had been moved into a folder labeled Old Files to Delete. My hands went cold. I opened the folder and found not just Robert's voice messages, but photos, videos, documents, everything I'd saved from our life together, all marked for deletion, all deemed disposable. When Sophia came home, I was sitting at the computer, the evidence glowing on the screen. "Mom? What's wrong?" I turned to face her, and she must have seen something in my expression because she went pale. "The files," I said quietly. "You were going to delete them." "No, I was cleaning up the hard drive, making space, but I would have asked you first." "Would you?" The question hung between us, and I saw the truth flicker across her face. Guilt, embarrassment, the realization that she'd been caught. "I wasn't actually going to delete them," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "But you considered it. You looked at my memories, my marriage, my life with your father, and you thought, these are taking up space I could use." "Mom, please. I trusted you," I said, and my voice was steady despite the hurt blooming in my chest. "I gave you another chance. I believed you'd changed. I have changed. This was just, I wasn't thinking." "That's the problem, Sophia. You don't think about how your actions affect me. You say the right words, make the right promises, but when it comes down to it, your needs still come first. Always." She sank into a chair, her face in her hands. "What do you want me to do?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the daughter I'd hoped she'd become, but the person she actually was. Talented, ambitious, capable of love, but also deeply self-centered, unable or unwilling to consistently prioritize anyone's needs above her own. And I realized something that felt both liberating and devastating. I couldn't change her. I could only change how I responded to her. "I want you to move out," I said. "What?" "You need your own space." "I need mine. We can't keep living like this, pretending we've fixed something that might be fundamentally broken." Tears streamed down her face. "You're giving up on me?" "No, I'm protecting myself. There's a difference." I stood up, gathering the flash drive with my backed-up files, holding it like the precious thing it was. "You can stay until you find a place. But Sophia, I need you to understand. I love you. I will always love you. But I won't keep setting myself on fire to keep you warm." I left her crying in the study and went to my room, where I placed the flash drive in Robert's wooden box, next to the cassette tape that had reminded me who I was. And I realized that the calm I'd been feeling wasn't peace. It was preparation. Something was coming. Something I couldn't quite see yet, but could feel approaching like a storm on the horizon. The justice I'd been unconsciously waiting for was almost here. Sophia moved out 2 weeks later. She found an apartment share with 2 other aspiring musicians, a place where late-night practice sessions were expected, rather than merely tolerated. We barely spoke during those final days. Just the logistics of boxes and furniture, the choreography of 2 people trying not to collide in shrinking space. The morning she left, she paused at the door with her last suitcase. "I really am sorry, Mom." "I know," I said, and I did. I believed she was sorry. I just didn't believe she'd change. The silence that filled the house after she left was different from the silence before. This wasn't empty. It was clean, like a room after years of clutter had finally been cleared away. I threw myself into the storytelling program. Margaret officially hired me, and I discovered I had a gift for making people feel safe enough to share their deepest truths. Maybe because I finally understood what it meant to carry pain that others couldn't see, couldn't measure, couldn't validate. One afternoon, about a month after Sophia left, a woman named Helen joined our circle. She was 83, with silver hair and eyes that had seen everything and judged nothing. "I want to talk about erasure," she said, her voice clear despite its softness. "About what it means to have someone try to delete you from existence." The room went quiet. Even the usual sounds, shuffling papers, shifting chairs, seemed to pause. "My daughter tried to erase me from my own life story," Helen continued. "She wanted to put me in a home, sell my house, donate my belongings. Not because I was incapable, but because my existence was inconvenient. My memories were clutter. My needs were obligations she didn't want to bear." I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't just Helen's story. It was mine. It was Dorothy's. It was half the people in this room. "What did you do?" someone asked. Helen smiled, and there was steel beneath the gentleness. "I told my story. I found people who would listen, who understood that being old doesn't mean being disposable. And you know what happened? My story mattered. People heard it. They shared it. And suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore." After the session, I found myself thinking about what Helen had said, about telling stories, about being heard. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat down and started writing, not in a journal, not for myself, but as if I were telling my story to the world. I wrote about Robert, about his voice messages, about what they meant to me, about grief and love and the way they intertwined like roots of two trees growing together. I wrote about Sophia, about motherhood and disappointment, and the moment when you realize your child has become someone you don't quite recognize. I wrote about erasure, about what it means to be treated as expendable, to have your memories labeled as files to delete, to exist in a space where your presence is merely tolerated rather than welcomed. The words poured out of me like water from a broken dam. Hours passed. My tea went cold. The house grew dark around me, but I kept writing. When I finally stopped, dawn was breaking. I had 30 pages, raw, unpolished, but true. So achingly true, it hurt to read them back. I titled it, "The Woman Whose Memories Were Almost Erased." The next day, I showed it to Margaret. She read it in silence, tears streaming down her face. When she finished, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite name. "Clara, this is extraordinary. Have you thought about what you want to do with it?" "I don't know. I just needed to write it, to get it out. There's a storytelling contest," she said slowly. "Regional, but it's gotten some attention in recent years. They accept written submissions and audio recordings. The theme this year is Invisible Voices. The deadline is next week." My heart stuttered. "You think I should submit this?" "I think the world needs to hear this. Not just this story, but what it represents. How many women have been erased by their own families? How many people have had their pain dismissed as inconvenient?" That evening, I recorded myself reading the story. I used the same equipment we used for the storytelling program. And I included something else. Something I'd been saving. I included Robert's message. The one from the cassette tape. "You always find a way back to light, Clara. Don't let them dim you." His voice, woven into my story, became proof. Proof that I'd been loved. Proof that my existence had mattered to someone. Proof that I was more than just a ghost taking up space. I submitted the piece anonymously, as the contest allowed. I titled it simply, "For Robert, Who Saw My Light." Then I waited. 3 weeks later, Margaret called me at 7 in the morning. "Clara, you need to see this. Now." I drove to the community center in my pajamas, my heart pounding. Margaret met me at the door with her laptop. It went viral. What went viral? Your story. The contest posted all the finalists online for public voting, and yours. Clara, it's everywhere. People are sharing it, talking about it, relating to it. She turned the laptop toward me, and I saw my words on the screen. Below them, thousands of comments. This made me cry. My mother went through something similar. I'm the daughter in this story. I never realized what I was doing to my mom until I read this. Everyone needs to hear this. This is what elder abuse looks like when it's wrapped in politeness. That voice message from her husband destroyed me. You can hear the love. You can hear him seeing her. The numbers kept climbing as I watched. Shares, comments, reactions. "The local news wants to interview you," Margaret said. "There's a podcast that focuses on family dynamics. A documentary filmmaker reached out. Clara, people are listening." I sat down, my legs suddenly weak. My private pain, my personal story, was no longer just mine. It had become something bigger, something that resonated with people I'd never met, would never know. "There's more," Margaret said gently. "The contest organizers want you to read it live at the Regional Arts Center. Next Friday. It's sold out. 300 people. 300 people want to hear about my life? No," Margaret corrected softly. 300 people want to hear about their lives. You just found the words for it. The week passed in a blur of interview requests and messages from strangers sharing their own stories of erasure, of being dismissed, of having their pain treated as inconvenient. Each message was a reminder that my experience wasn't unique, it was universal. But I hadn't told Sophia, hadn't even thought to tell her. Our communication since she moved out had been sporadic. A text here, a brief call there, surface-level updates that carefully avoided anything that mattered. Friday came. I wore a dress Robert had always loved. Deep blue, simple but elegant. Margaret drove me to the art center, talking the whole way to keep me from panicking. You don't have to be nervous. You're just reading your truth. But I was nervous. Terrified, actually. 300 strangers about to hear my deepest pain, my rawest moments. The arts center was beautiful, all warm wood and soft lighting. The seats filled quickly. I waited backstage, my printed story trembling in my hands. And then I heard a familiar voice in the lobby, Sophia's voice. I peered through the curtain and saw her talking to someone at the door, her face confused. I don't understand. My mother is reading? My mother? Clara Morrison? The person confirmed it, and I watched Sophia's expression cycle through shock, confusion, and something else. Something I couldn't quite read. She took a seat in the back row. Our eyes met across the distance, and neither of us looked away. The moderator introduced me. Tonight, we have a story that has touched thousands of people across social media. A story about loss, love, and what it means to fight for your right to exist in your own life. Please welcome Clara Morrison. I walked onto the stage on shaking legs. The lights were bright, but I could see faces in the audience. Older women with tissues already in their hands. Younger people leaning forward, attentive. And in the back, Sophia, her face pale and unreadable. I began to read. My voice cracked on the first line, then steadied. I told them about Robert, about the voice messages, about Sophia moving in, about being called pathetic and exhausting and invisible. I told them about the files marked for deletion. I heard gasps, saw people crying, felt the collective intake of breath when I revealed the worst moments. And then I played Robert's recording. His voice filled the theater, warm and alive, and so full of love it was almost unbearable. You always find a way back to light, Clara. Don't let them dim you. When the recording ended, the silence was absolute. 300 people holding their breath. I looked up, directly at Sophia. Tears were streaming down her face. I did find my way back, I continued, my voice stronger now, not through anger or revenge, but through remembering that my light was never dependent on someone else's ability to see it. It was always mine, and no one, no matter how much I loved them, had the right to take it from me. The final words of my story hung in the air. She thought my memories were noise, but the world heard music. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave. People stood. Some were crying openly, others were nodding, their faces reflecting recognition and pain and healing all at once. But I was only looking at one person. Sophia stood in the back row, her hand over her mouth, her whole body shaking with sobs. And I realized this wasn't revenge. This wasn't even about her. This was about every person who'd ever been told their pain didn't matter. Every woman who'd been erased from her own story. Every human being who'd been made to feel invisible. This was about finding light in darkness. This was about refusing to be dimmed. This was justice. Not the cruel kind that destroys. The kind that illuminates. The kind that says, I existed. I mattered. I still do. After the reading, people lined up to speak with me. They shared their own stories of erasure, of being dismissed, of finding their way back to light. Each conversation was a reminder that pain shared becomes bearable, that visibility is a gift we give each other. Sophia waited until the crowd thinned. She approached slowly, uncertainly, like someone walking toward a ledge they weren't sure would hold their weight. Mom. Just that. Just my name, spoken like a question. Sophia. We stood there in the emptying theater, the space between us filled with everything unsaid, everything that had been said, everything my story had revealed to an audience of strangers. I didn't know you'd written about us, she said finally. I didn't write about us. I wrote about me, my experience, my pain, my journey back. She flinched. It was honest. Yes. It was also brutal. Hearing myself described like that, Hearing what I did to you. Her voice broke. Everyone here now knows what kind of daughter I am. They know what kind of daughter you were, I corrected gently. What kind of daughter you are now is up to you. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Did you do this to humiliate me? The question hung between us, and I understood then what she still didn't grasp. This had never been about her. No, sweetheart. I did this to save myself, to remember that my story mattered even when you told me it didn't, to find my voice again. But you used real details, real things I said. I told my truth. That's not the same as attacking you. She sank into one of the theater seats, her shoulders shaking. I listened to Dad's voice. The recording you played. I haven't heard his voice in so long, and hearing him say those things about you, about your light. She looked up at me, mascara streaking her face. He loved you so much, and I was so jealous of that. Even now, even after he's gone. I sat down beside her, leaving a seat between us. Close, but not crowding. Your father loved you too, completely, unconditionally, but he saw you, really saw you. The way he talks about you in that recording, like you're this incredible person he can't believe he gets to love. And I never understood it. I just saw you as mom, as someone who was supposed to support me. I never saw you as Clara. The name, my name, spoken with recognition, felt like forgiveness I hadn't known I needed. I'm learning to see myself that way again, I said. As Clara, as someone whole and complex and worthy, independent of anyone else's needs or perceptions. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry for trying to erase you, for making you invisible in your own home, for treating your memories like they were disposable. I let the apology settle, let it mean what it meant without rushing to forgiveness or absolution. Thank you for saying that. Is it too late? She asked, her voice small. For us? I thought about that, about the months of pain, the systematic dismissal, the files marked for deletion, about trust broken and boundaries crossed and love tested beyond its limits. It's not too late, I said carefully, but it's also not the same. We can't go back to how things were. We can only go forward, and that requires real change. Not just words, not just guilt. Actual, sustained, meaningful change. I want to change. I need to change. She turned to face me fully. Hearing that recording, hearing Dad talk about your light and then realizing I'd been trying to dim it, Mom, I can't be that person. I won't be. Then don't be. Be better. Do better. Not for me, but for yourself. We sat in silence for a moment, the theater empty now except for us and the echoes of 300 people who'd witnessed my story. The documentary filmmaker, Sophia said suddenly. The one Margaret mentioned? Are you going to do it? I'm considering it. You should. You should tell this story as widely as possible. Because you're right, it's not just about us. It's about everyone who's ever been made to feel like their existence is an inconvenience. She stood up, gathering her purse. I should go. I just wanted you to know I was here, that I heard you, really heard you. Sophia, she turned back. I love you. That hasn't changed. But I also love myself now, and I won't sacrifice one for the other ever again. She nodded, tears spilling fresh. I love you too, Mom, and I'm proud of you. So incredibly proud. After she left, I sat alone in the theater for a while longer. The stage lights had been turned off, but the exit signs glowed softly in the darkness, illuminating the way out. The documentary did happen. Over the next 6 months, a filmmaker named Rachel followed me as I continued the storytelling program, as I gave talks about erasure and visibility, as I connected with thousands of people who'd experienced similar dismissal in their own lives. The film was called Still Here: Stories of Invisible Women. My story was the centerpiece, but Rachel interviewed dozens of others. Women who'd been erased by children, by spouses, by society's expectation that aging meant becoming less relevant, less worthy of consideration. It premiered at a film festival and won an Audience Choice Award. But more importantly, it sparked conversations about how we treat our elders, about the invisible labor of women, about the right to exist with dignity at every stage of life. Sophia came to the premiere. She sat in the front row, and when the film showed the interview where I talked about her, about our relationship, about the pain she'd caused, She didn't look away. She witnessed it, owned it. Afterward, she approached me with hesitation. "I've been in therapy," she said. "Real therapy. Working on understanding why I treated you that way. Why I needed to diminish you to feel significant myself. How's it going?" "It's hard, but I'm learning. About boundaries and respect, and the difference between love and obligation." She paused. "I'm also learning about forgiveness. Not just asking for it, but understanding that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. That we can move forward without pretending the past didn't happen." "That's wise. I got it from my mother." She smiled tentatively. "The wise one, not the invisible one." Over the following year, Sophia and I rebuilt something. Not the relationship we'd had before. That was gone, irrevocably altered by what we'd both learned about ourselves and each other. But something new, something honest. We met for coffee every few weeks. Sometimes the conversation flowed easily. Sometimes it was stilted, careful. Two people still learning how to be in each other's presence without causing harm. But we showed up, both of us, as ourselves. She never moved back in. She built her own life, pursued her music, learned to find validation from her work rather than from diminishing others. She had some success, not the stardom she'd dreamed of, but steady gigs, a growing following, the satisfaction of creating something meaningful. And when she talked about her music, she sometimes mentioned how her mother had taught her about finding your voice, about the difference between taking up space and taking someone else's. I continued the storytelling program, watched it grow beyond anything I'd imagined. People traveled from other states to participate, to share their stories, to witness others being seen and heard. I wrote more pieces, published some, kept others private, learned that not every story needs an audience. Some are just for us, proof that we lived, that we felt, that we mattered. On the anniversary of Robert's death, I visited his grave as I did every year, but this time felt different. I wasn't going to cry at his feet, wasn't going to ask him what to do, wasn't going to lose myself in longing for what was gone. I went to tell him what had happened, to share my journey, to let him know his faith in me hadn't been misplaced. "You were right," I said, kneeling by his stone. I did find my way back to light. It took longer than either of us probably imagined. It hurt more than I thought I could bear. But I found it. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, carrying the scent of fresh earth and growing things. Sophia's doing better. We're doing better. It's not perfect, but it's honest. And I think you'd be proud of that. Of us. I placed fresh roses against the stone. Not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. Because love doesn't end with death, doesn't diminish with distance, doesn't require erasing yourself to prove its worth. "Thank you," I whispered, "for seeing me, for loving me, for leaving me that message when I needed it most. Your voice saved me, Robert. It reminded me who I was when I'd forgotten." As I stood to leave, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because the pain was gone. Grief doesn't work that way. But because I'd learned to carry it without letting it crush me, to honor the past without being imprisoned by it. I'd learned that remembering love and building a new life weren't mutually exclusive, that being a widow didn't mean being half a person, that being a mother didn't mean being invisible, that my story, my voice, my light, my existence mattered. On my way home, I stopped at the community center. A new storytelling session was starting, and I wanted to be there to welcome the participants, to create that space where people could be seen without judgment, heard without dismissal. As I walked in, I passed a bulletin board covered with photos from our programs, faces of every age, every background, every story, and in the center, a quote someone had printed and posted. She thought my memories were noise, but the world heard music. I stood there looking at those words, my words, and realized something profound. I hadn't just survived. I'd transformed, not into someone new, but into someone I'd always been underneath all the roles and expectations and self-erasure. I'd become Clara again, fully, completely, unapologetically, and in becoming myself, I'd helped others find permission to do the same. That evening, as I sat in my home, my space, my sanctuary, my chosen environment, I played Robert's recording one more time. "You always find a way back to light, Clara." I did, I whispered back. I finally did. And then I turned off the recording and sat in the silence. But this silence wasn't empty. It wasn't sad. It wasn't the absence of something. It was peace. It was wholeness. It was the sound of a woman who'd learned that the most important voice she'd ever hear was her own. The most important light she'd ever carry was already inside her, and no one, no matter how much she loved them, could take that away again. I learned that sometimes the silence doesn't mean you're invisible. Sometimes it means you're finally complete.